My name is Dr. Kritika, and we're going to be kickstarting our biochemistry sessions today. So, I picked up a very simple yet very important topic, that is metabolism of iron. So, what all will we be seeing today? We'll be seeing what is iron, why is it needed for our body, what are the sources of iron, how much of iron should we take every day, how is it absorbed, how is it transported, how is it stored in our body, and most importantly, how is iron metabolism regulated? So, what is the big deal about iron? Why do we need iron? Iron is one of the most important trace elements in our body. By trace element, I mean that we require it less than 100 mg per day, right? And iron has this peculiar property of being a divalent metal ion. It can exist in two states, that is a Fe2 plus or a ferrous state, and an Fe3 plus or a ferric state. And it can keep shifting between these two states by either accepting or giving away an electron. Though this property is half the reason of its different functions, it also poses a threat because by shifting between these two states, it also catalyzes the formation of toxic free radicals. And so to prevent this free radical injury, usually iron, if you see, it's not circulated in our body in a free form. It is usually sequestered with the proteins. So if I was to ask you, what are the functions of iron in a class? The first thing you would say is hemoglobin and myoglobin, that it is involved in oxygen binding and transport as a part of hemoglobin and myoglobin. In this case, if you see, iron will be like in a caged structure, which we call as a protoporphyrin ring. And these type of proteins we call as heme proteins. These a very good example of these heme proteins is your hemoglobin, myoglobin, and also something which you will come across in the electron transport chain called as cytochromes. The cytochromes also are, very, very important structures, essential for your electron transport chain, cellular respiration. Other than this, there are also some heme proteins found in enzymes such as your catalases, peroxidases. Non-heme proteins are also available in our body. Most commonly, we see them as the iron sulfur clusters or FeS clusters, as I'm going to say hereafter. One very important function of this iron sulfur clusters is that they act as enzyme cofactors or active sites. A good example is your tricarboxylic acid cycle or TCA cycle, which has this enzyme aconitase. The FeS cluster is the active site of an aconitase enzyme. Other enzymes like xanthine oxidase, lipoate synthase, these are all FeS clustered enzymes. Other than this, other than being an active site or a cofactor, they also have a regulatory function. If you come across in something called as IRP, iron regulatory protein in molecular biology, it is nothing but an FeS cluster. Okay, so that's about the functions of iron. What are the sources of iron? Most commonly, green leafy vegetables is what everyone says. That is because these vegetables are very, very, very rich source of iron. They have a high iron content, followed by your liver and meats, especially your red meats like beef and lamb. Otherwise, more common, more iron-rich sources would be your cereals, pulses, and also jaggeries, a very good source. So how do I take in iron? How much of iron do I take in every day? An average adult would require around 20 milligrams of iron per day. But this requirement of iron depends upon your status, your body status, and your developmental state. Usually children, they have a higher need, a higher metabolic need, and they have an increased blood volume, which makes them require iron more. The same case in pregnant and lactating women, and also those who are menstruating, because they have an increased blood loss every month. So these people would they would require more iron, that is more than 20. So children would require 20 to 30 mg per day, and pregnant women have written 40 mg per day. Okay, so I've taken iron in all these sources. How do I absorb them? How do I ensure maximum absorption? So there are a set of factors which increase ion absorption, and there are a set of factors which decrease. You see the factors which increase ion absorption first. Now, usually iron in food is in the ferric form, the 3+ form. But for it to enter our system, we need it to be in the ferrous or your 2+ form. So reducing agents, your HCl in your gastric mucosa, ascorbic acid, FES structures in your proteins, all these things, they help to change your iron from ferric to ferrous, allowing increased absorption. So nature of food, like I told you, red meat, we consider them as your heme iron. They tend to get absorbed much better than your non-heme iron. Also disease states like iron deficiency anemia, where the need of iron is more, the absorption of iron also is increased to about 20%. Now, contralaterally, factors which reduce iron absorption most commonly is your phytic and oxalic acid. And what is so ironic is that this phytic and oxalic acid is very commonly seen in your green leafy vegetables. The same source of iron, which was very high in vegetables, also comes with phytic and oxalic acid, ensuring that your absorption is reduced to about 50%. Now, this puts your vegetarians in a higher risk for developing iron deficiency. Other than this, calcium and phosphates also form complexes with iron, hampering their absorption. Now, this is the reason why milk is a very poor source of iron. But as babies, as soon as we are born, milk is our only source, right? So how do these babies survive without iron? They generally rely on the storage form of iron transferred from the mother to the baby during her pregnancy. In addition to your calcium and phosphates, even antacids will reduce your iron absorption. So what we have here is a typical enterocyte. I'm going to explain to you in steps about how iron is absorbed, right? So now we have iron in food in the ferric form, as I've told you. We need it to get converted from your ferric to your ferrous form. So how does this happen? First, in your apical membrane, you have an enzyme called a ferrireductase. Now this enzyme is what is going to convert your Fe3+ into your Fe2+. And this happens in your duodenum and proximal small intestine. Now once we have converted your iron into the ferrous form, it is going to get enter your intestinal cell through something which we call as a DMT1 or a dimetyl transporter type 1. Okay, now this is not a specific ion transporter, it's a common cationic transporter. So it's going to be able to allow passage of any divalent metal ion. Okay, now we have entered how much ever ferrous I want, how much ever iron I want, I have converted into a ferrous form. I have made it enter your cell through your DMT1. What do I do with the rest of iron? Whatever is not needed for me, I'm just going to excrete the unabsorbed iron. Okay. Now this is a very important phenomenon. I will explain the importance later. Okay, so once the iron has entered the cell, remember it is in your 2+ form, your ferrous form. What happens after that depends on how much of iron stores I have in my body. Let's take into consideration that I have enough iron in my body, right? What I want to do is I want to store this iron for further use. So I'm going to convert it into a ferric form and make it bind to a protein called as ferritin. Now this ferritin is a very nice protein. It is produced mostly in the liver as a apoferritin, and it has around 4,500 binding sites for iron. This is one form of storage protein. There is another storage form of protein which we call as hemosiderin. Now hemosiderin, to put it in a very blunt way, is a partially degraded type of ferritin. And it binds to iron more tightly in the sense it doesn't give it away very easily. Whereas ferritin, whenever my body needs it, it's going to give off or let go of ferritin for it to enter, let go of iron for it to enter the bloodstream. Also, this hemosiderin is a less water soluble compound. And they use this property to differentiate between ferritin and hemosiderin. Okay, So now I have made iron enter my intestinal cell, and I have made it bind to ferritin because I have sufficient stores of iron. Now, what if I don't have enough iron in my body? What if I'm deficient in iron and I'm taking a good meal of some spinach? I don't want to store my iron. I don't want to spend energy in conserving it. I want to use it now. In this case, what I will do, I'm going to try to make the Fe2 plus or iron molecule exit the cell, the contralateral side, through a channel which we call as ferroportin. Now, this ferroportin accepts iron in the 2 plus state, so I need not change it back to 3 plus or whatever. Now, remember, I told you that iron is not always in a loose state in your body. It has to be bound to a protein so that it will not produce any free radicals. Now, once it enters the bloodstream, it's going to bind to a protein which we call as transferrin. Now, transferrin is also a beautiful compound. It helps, it's mainly a transfer or transport protein of iron, we call it. It has only 2 binding sites of iron. So, one transferrin molecule can bind to 2 atoms of iron. But the catch here is, if I want my iron to bind to transferrin, I need it to be in the ferric form. So again, I have to convert my ferrous into ferric. Now we have a helper here in the form of hephaestin. This hephaestin is a copper-containing enzyme. Specifically, it's a peroxidase enzyme, and its main function is to convert your ferrous to ferric form, right? There is another similar enzyme, again a copper containing enzyme, which is called as ceruloplasmin. This also has the same function, but it is more active in the liver and the reticuloendothelial cells. Whereas in the intestine, the most active peroxidase would be your hephaestin. So what hephaestin does is, as your Fe2 plus is exiting the cell, it's going to oxidize it into your ferric form and make it bind to your transferrin. Transferrin, now having 2 iron molecules, very happily roams around in your blood and gives it to whichever place it is required. Okay, now we're done till this. I want to bring to you the idea of a protein called as hepcidin. Hepcidin is a most important regulatory protein of iron. Hepcidin is produced in the liver for various stimuli like hypoxia, iron deficiency. And what this hepcidin does is, it is a negative regulator of ferroportin. So I'll explain to you in detail in the next slide. But for now, I want you to understand that hepcidin ensures that ferroportin does not send out iron out of the cell. It prevents the release of iron from the intestinal cell into the bloodstream. Why does it want to do this? So the only way I can regulate iron metabolism is by ensuring that not enough or absolutely enough amount is absorbed in the intestine. This is what we call as mucosal block theory. That is, depending upon my iron status, depending upon the iron status in my body, I will tell the intestinal cell itself either stop absorbing iron or absorb more iron, right? And this is done by this wonderful protein hepcidin. Like I said, produced in the liver. What it does is 2 main functions. One is it is going to down regulate ferroportin, I told you. The other is it's going to reduce the transcription of your DMT1 protein. So essentially, if there is hepcidin, your iron absorption into the intestinal cell and also release into the bloodstream is reduced, right? Now, in cases of iron deficiency anemia, the synthesis of hepcidin is reduced. So there is no negative regulation of these proteins, which ensures that there is maximum absorption and release of iron into the bloodstream. This is why we call that, we say that the amount of iron which is absorbed or retained is dependent on your iron status. This is why we call iron as a one-way element, because the only route of excretion of iron is through cell shedding or blood loss. And these 2 things cannot be regulated in our body. And we don't want excess iron because of the free radical damage, which I told you. So how do I do? The only way I can help it is if I regulate the amount of iron which is absorbed at the mucosal level. The mucosal block theory is very important because it is very unique quality of iron. Okay, so I've had a good meal of iron. I've absorbed it. I've put it into my bloodstream. I've saved some and I've released some into the bloodstream. Now, what does the iron do after that? So I'll start with this. Uh, so an intake of almost 1 to 2 milligram per day, and around 3 mg is along with already circulating transferrin, some new ingested transferrin bound iron is coming inside. Now, 2/3 of this is accumulated for your erythropoiesis or your RBCs, right? And very minor amount of iron is for your enzymes, which we discussed earlier. So I'm just going to discuss now in this picture, just for you to understand how iron is maintained. I'm going to discuss to you about how it is going to get into your bone marrow for erythropoiesis. So we have transferrin bound iron circulating in the body, and it is going to deposit the iron to whichever cell has a transferrin receptor. So in this case, it's going to get into your bone marrow. The bone marrow is going to take in and accommodate how much ever iron it needs into your producing RBCs. If there is extra, it is going to save as ferritin. Now, RBCs are roaming around in your blood with a lot of iron content, and their lifespan is around 120 days. Now, even though they have the maximum amount of iron in your body, these are the substances which also produce or ensure that there is good reutilization of iron. And this is because they are eaten up by your splenic macrophages after your RBC's lifespan. Now, on being eaten up, there are two things which can happen. One is that your broken down RBCs, they give off hemoglobin. In that case, they are going to be taken in by something which we call as haptoglobulin. Or another fate is that your hemoglobin gets broken down into heme and globin. The globin part being a protein gets reutilized. The free heme can get bound to a protein called as hemopexin. Now both these haptoglobulin and hemopexin together, their main function is to ensure that they can capture whatever iron they can find and save it from being excreted in the form of heme through your urine. So what they do, they have haptoglobin has captured hemoglobin and hemopexin has captured free heme, and they will take it into your liver, into your Kupffer cells, hepatocytes, and store it there. In this way, the liver also acts as a very good storage depot of iron. And so when the amount of plasma iron is less, it's going to send off how much ever iron it has stored, how much ever our body needs, it's going to send off in the form of transferrin and enters your blood pool. What is to be noted here is, depending upon this iron status, like it is able to sense that I have so much of iron, depending upon that, it's going to start synthesizing hepcidin also. And hepcidin is going to go and block your mucosa or allow your mucosa to increase or stop your iron absorption. This is your mucosal block theory and your iron distribution summarized. What I also want you guys to note is this wonderful phenomenon where around 1 to 2 milligrams per day of iron is lost, and so beautifully our body is able to regulate in such a way that only that much is being absorbed. So we'll wrap up today's session with this. We will have your disorders of iron metabolism in another session. These are my references for today's lecture. If you have any doubts, if you have any queries, any constructive criticism, suggestions as to what you want the next class to be, you can direct message me on Facebook or Twitter. Facebook or Instagram. Also, I want you guys to know that these are not lectures to substitute your routine classes. They are only for complementing your classes. Thank you.